The desert had a way of stripping a man down to whatever truth he carried inside him. Ethan Cole knew that better than most. He sat motionless on his horse at the edge of the dry basin, dust clinging to his boots and coat, watching the morning light crawl across the sand like a slow burning fire. The land around him was wide and unforgiving, cracked earth, scattered sagebrush, distant red hills rising like the backs of sleeping beasts. No trees, no rivers, just wind, heat, and silence. This land had taken nearly everything from him. Once years ago, this ranch had been something worth fighting for. His father's cattle had grazed freely. His mother's laughter had filled the small cottage near the well. And the nights had smelled of coffee, leather, and horse sweat instead of loneliness. But drought didn't care about memories, and debt didn't care about pride. Now Ethan was 38 years old, with a failing ranch, 3 horses left from a herd of 20, and creditors who circled like vultures waiting for him to fall. He nudged his horse forward and rode toward town. The auction. The town of Red Hollow was already awake, though it was barely past mid-morning. Wooden buildings lined the main road, their paint sun-bleached and peeling. Men gathered near the saloon, voices low and sharp. Horses were tied to posts. Dust swirled with every step. And behind the sheriff's office, beneath a canvas awning stretched between 2 posts, the auction was underway. Ethan hadn't planned to stop. He'd told himself he was only in town to sell 2 saddles and buy feed, nothing more. But curiosity, or maybe fate, pulled his gaze toward the crowd. A man's voice rang out loud and practiced. "Strong hands, good worker. Been on farms, ranches, rail crews. Who'll start the bidding?" Ethan slowed his horse. He hated these auctions, always had. The territory called them labor contracts, but everyone knew the truth. Women and men who had lost everything, immigrants, widows, debtors, were paraded like cattle and sold into years of bonded work. Some found decent homes, many didn't. Ethan had sworn never to be part of it. Then he saw her. She stood on the small wooden platform, hands clasped tightly in front of her, head held high despite the crowd's stares. Dust streaked her worn dress, and her boots were cracked from years of hard use. Dark hair, pulled back loosely, escaped in strands around her face. She was not young. The auctioneer said it clearly, almost dismissively. 39 years old, experienced, strong back, knows horses, cooking, mending, fieldwork. 39. The crowd shifted. Some men snorted. Others lost interest immediately. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. She didn't look weak. She looked weathered, like the desert itself, like someone who had endured storms and still stood upright afterward. Her eyes lifted for a moment, scanning the crowd. They met Ethan's. It was brief, no more than a heartbeat, but it hit him harder than any bullet ever. "Me time, protection." Leanne stared at the ground. "And me?" she asked. "You get a home," Ethan said. "Real food, fair work, and freedom after the contract ends, earlier if you want." She laughed once, bitter and soft. "You're asking me to marry a stranger to survive?" "Yes," he said simply. "And I know how that sounds." She looked up then, eyes sharp. "You could have bought someone younger, easier." "I didn't want easier," Ethan said. "I wanted someone who could choose." The wind swept through the yard, lifting dust between them. Finally, she spoke. "If I say no?" "I take you back," he said. No questions. Her gaze searched his face, as if trying to find the lie. She didn't find one. "Then I'll say yes," she said quietly. "But on my terms." Ethan nodded. "Name them." "Respect," she said. "Honesty. And no touching unless I say so." "You have my word." She exhaled slowly. "Then we marry before the sun goes down." The ride into the desert. They left Red Hollow together, riding side by side but not touching. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, gold and red beneath the blazing sky. Neither spoke much. Ethan wondered what kind of man he was becoming. Leanne wondered whether she had just traded one kind of captivity for another. Behind them, unseen, a pair of riders followed at a distance, men who had noticed Ethan's bid. men who didn't like losing. And as the sun climbed toward its peak, none of them yet knew how much blood, love, and fire this decision would cost before nightfall. The desert never truly slept. As Ethan and Leon rode west, the sun sliding lower behind the red hills, the silence around them began to feel watchful, like eyes hidden. Beneath the sand and stone, the horses sensed it first, ears twitching, hooves striking the earth with nervous impatience. Ethan glanced back once. Just distant movement. Riders. He said nothing. The first shot. They were halfway to the ranch when the crack of a rifle split the air. The bullet tore past Ethan's shoulder and vanished into the brush. "Down!" he shouted. Leon reacted instantly, sliding from her horse with a speed that surprised him. She rolled behind a boulder as another shot rang out. The horses reared, screaming, before Ethan slapped their reins loose. "Stay low," he said, pulling his revolver. 3 men emerged from the rise, hard faces, sheep hats, desperation in their eyes. One of them grinned. "You paid cheap for her," the man called. "We'll pay better." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She's not for sale." Gunfire erupted. Dust exploded around them as bullets struck stone and sand. Ethan fired back, measured and calm despite the thunder in his chest. One man fell with a cry. Another ducked behind cover. Then something unexpected happened. Leon picked up a fallen rifle. Her hands were steady. She fired once. The third man dropped. Silence followed, heavy, broken only by the wind. Ethan stared at her. "You've done this before," he said. She lowered the rifle slowly. "The world doesn't leave women like me many choices." They didn't speak again until they reached the ranch. The cottage. The cottage stood alone against the desert, small, weather-beaten but solid. A single window glowed orange as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. Inside, it smelled of wood, leather, and old memories. Ethan set water to boil while Leon washed blood from her hands. They moved around each other carefully, like strangers sharing a fragile truce. After they ate, the silence returned. "We should finish this," Ethan said quietly. He produced the papers. They signed by lamplight. When it was done, they were legally bound, husband and wife, before the sun. Had fully surrendered tonight. No kiss followed, no celebration, only a long, uncertain look. Night confessions. The wind howled outside as darkness wrapped the cottage. Lynn sat at the small table, fingers wrapped around a mug. "Why did you really choose me?" Ethan hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because you looked like someone who wouldn't break." Her eyes softened, not with affection but understanding. "You won't own me," she said. "I won't try," he replied. That night they slept in separate rooms, but neither truly slept. Enemies return. Just before dawn, the horses screamed. Ethan reached for his gun as the door exploded inward. The men had returned, more of them this time. Gunfire tore through the cottage. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Ethan fought like a man defending his last breath. Leanne moved beside him, not behind him, reloading, aiming, firing with deadly calm. Outside, flames licked the fence. Ethan took a bullet to the shoulder, but kept standing. When it was over, bodies lay in the dust. The ranch still stood. So did they. The truth revealed. As Ethan collapsed onto a chair, blood soaking his shirt, Leanne pressed cloth against the wound. "You'll live," she said firmly. Then quietly, "I need to tell you something." He looked up. "I wasn't only a laborer," she said. "I ran. From a man who owned more than land. He owned people. I testified against him once. These men, they were his." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then they'll keep coming. Unless," she said, "we stand together." Something shifted between them then. Not fear, not obligation, but choice. Love slowly earned. Days passed. Ethan healed. Leon worked the land. They talked at night, about losses, about dreams that felt foolish to name aloud. One evening, as the sun burned red against the horizon, Ethan said, "You can leave when you want." Leon studied him for a long moment. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm staying." She reached for his hand, not trembling now. This time he didn't pull away. The final surprise. Weeks later, a rider arrived with official papers. The man Leon had fled was dead, killed during a transport raid. The threat was over. Freedom stood at their door. Ethan read the notice once, then handed it to her. "You're free," he said. Liane folded the paper carefully. "I was free the day you treated me like a person," she replied. That night, beneath a sky full of stars, they stood outside the cottage, desert stretching endlessly around them. Not owned, not desperate, chosen. Epilogue. Years later, travelers would speak of a ranch that bloomed where nothing should grow, of a man who learned strength wasn't loneliness, of a woman who refused to be broken, and of a marriage begun not in love, but forged by fire, respect, and the courage to choose each other before the sun went down.